खाली है पर पूरी बैठना नहीं है आप।
बैठना नहीं है।
इसका एंगल चला जा रहा है।
स्लाइड का इसको पकड़ो। इसका एंगल ये सेट करो।
तो रुक भी नहीं रहा।
हेलो,
अरे सौमदीप कीजिए सेट।
तो मैं बैठा रहता हूँ यहीं पे।
ये ज़्यादा बेहतर है। इस पर उल्टा कीजिए, उल्टा कीजिए, उल्टा कीजिए। Can keep it like that. No, 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 no.
उधर ही रखना पड़ेगा।
जस्ट
Good evening. Hello everyone. It's my honor to introduce our distinguished speaker, Professor Priya Yadav, who has been a part of Sitara since 2012. Professor Yadav holds a BE in Electrical Electronics and MSc in Physics from BITS Pilani in 1993, followed by an MS in Electrical Engineering from Boston University in 1995. She earned her PhD from MIT, Cambridge, USA in 2012, focusing on organic semiconductor solar cells. Beyond academia, Professor Yadav is a successful entrepreneur. She is the founder of Nagaro, a multinational software company, where she held various roles from 1998 to 2006, and currently she serves as a trustee at Yuva Mitra, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting farmers, and is on the board of electronics at Orsted College, Solapur. Additionally, she is founder of Praksha University, Chandigarh. So please join me in welcoming Professor Priya.
So yeah, good evening everyone. So thanks to the department for giving me this opportunity. How much time do you have? Like 35, 40 minutes? Okay, 45 minutes. Okay, great. Okay, so this is the title of my talk, Energy for Irrigation, Technical, Societal and Educational Aspects. So this slide essentially shows you the importance of electricity for irrigation. And so electricity for irrigation comprises 18% of the total electricity consumption in the country, and about 28% in Maharashtra. So a huge part of electricity is going into irrigation. And we all know that irrigation is a major contributor to yield, and 55% of the population depends on agriculture. So now the common discussions and narratives, when we talk about energy for irrigation in India, there are some points which come up. Okay? One is that irrigation pumping is leading to water depletion. This is a problem in Punjab. Water table is going down in Maharashtra. It creates drinking water issues in various areas. Second is that subsidized energy is a drain on finances of utility and government. Third is that subsidies lead to low-level equilibrium and hence poor quality of supply for farmers. What does this low-level equilibrium mean? Essentially, it means that energy supply to farmers is highly subsidized, farmers are paying very little, and so the utility does not have the incentive to give good quality supply and maintain the infrastructure. Fourth is currently that solar pumps. Everyone is talking about solar pumps as a solution to this subsidy burden, as well as of course it is green power. However, the con to this that is talked about, that's a narrative, is that this could lead to overusage, since farmers don't have to concern themselves with a tariff for the energy usage. Once they have a pump, they will leave it running. So now these are the questions that you will hear broadly. Okay? And how do we analyze these questions, these complex questions? Because there's a lot that's going on inside each of these. And what sort of analysis do we need? What sort of data do we need to come to rational decisions and solutions? So that's what the talk that what I'm going to talk about will bring out these aspects. So this slide broadly shows the main stakeholders or entities in the sector and the parameters that should be measured to do the analysis at these various points and their concerns and method of doing this. So first of course is the farmer. So if we want to analyze the farmer's irrigation needs, we need the landholding, we need the cropping pattern, and we need to know the irrigation requirement for those crops. And what are the farmer's concerns? Their access to irrigation, first of all, does he have access at all to energy supply? Time of day supply, that is energy supply is, energy for irrigation is often supplied at night, this is a problem. Quality of supply, that is low voltage and tripping, pump failures, etc. And delay in new connection. It takes a long time, farmers apply for connection and there's a delay. So some of the methods to get this data regarding these aspects is farmer interviews or even measurements, metering at the farmer's pumps. Next, so you have the farmer and his pump. The next level is the distribution transformer. So you have 25 to 30 farmers connected to one distribution transformer through a low tension network. So what are the parameters that we may want to measure there is how many are the sanctioned pumps, how many are the unsanctioned pumps, what is the total load on the transformer, and also the LT network design. So their concerns may be the distribution transformer failure or low voltages because of the network. So method of collecting data may be field work to document the network, measurements, or even surveys. Next, so you have now these distribution transformers of 25 to 30 farmers connected to each transformer. Then you have maybe the transformers in say 1 to 6 villages connected on one feeder. That is one network from a substation that snakes through 1 to 6 villages connecting these distribution transformers. So and a substation may have 1 to 2 feeders. So there is a certain area served by this substation which may cover maybe 10 villages. So what are the concerns at that level? There may be power factor at the substation and the feeder which leads to higher capacity usage than needed. The design of the network, what is the peak demand? So essentially the peak demand is something that will come across often because irrigation is extremely seasonal. So in Maharashtra you have the monsoons, then you have the winter season and then the summer. So in the monsoons, crops need very little irrigation. There's mostly rain-fed and if there's a dry spell, there is some irrigation. In the winter, then you have the what we call the rabi crops or the winter crops. They need irrigation because one thing is that the monsoons have stopped, but also that's the point where there is water available in the wells for irrigation. And so those are the kind of crops that are cropped in Rabi season. So that's where there is a peak demand in the start of the Rabi season, October, November, December. So that peak loading is very important. What is the peak load will be, because that's what affects, that's what determines what the infrastructure capacity should be. So this data can be collected through secondary data, MSCDC, the utility distribution company data, or through the project staff. And lastly, you have the utility or the distribution company, which is in charge of this entire system. And what are the measurable parameters? If they want to determine their, operational status, they look at efficiency and maybe recovery or collection. How much of money are they getting back, earning? And some of their concerns now are that the renewable energy mix on the grid is increasing, and secondly, what should the subsidy structure be so that they get the money back. Maybe for us to collect data related to the distribution company, there are various documents, policy documents and other orders, the regulatory company orders, and interactions with the utility personnel. Okay, so that sort of just roughly gives you an idea of the various entities and stakeholders. Alright, so I'm going to discuss my work. I'll be discussing just three works. One is water, energy, food linkage methodology. So this was the problem this addresses is a higher level decision making problem. And so the solution will aid in policy design. Second is the energy estimation tool for infrastructure problem, for infrastructure planning, I'm sorry. And this, it addresses the problem of the quality of supply or the problems that farmers face in the field. So, you know, the poor voltage, the pump breakdown, the distribution transformer breakdown, these are the problems that this tool addresses. And it's a tool that is to be incorporated into the government processes, is incorporated. And thirdly, it encourages information comprehension and collective action among farmers and other stakeholders. The third topic I'm going to talk about is demand modeling. So as far as farmers are concerned, this addresses the problem of nighttime supply to farmers. But it also addresses an overarching problem that is going to be faced by all our distribution companies, by our utilities essentially, with the increased incorporation of renewable energy. So this demand modeling will feed into a tool for tariff decisions, for time of day tariffs, and for supply side planning. That is what kind of sources should be invested in and to what extent. So these are the three things. So first is connecting energy, water and crops. So this topic essentially came upon it because we saw that there were many of these, so like I said, that one of the narratives in the current discussion is that low cost power is leading to water depletion. So to address that, many policies and schemes have been coming up. For instance, this, the left side is that Nobel Improvement in Punjab talks about an energy payback scheme. That is, farmers in Punjab were incentivized to use less water by giving them some amount of money per hectare of land that they were irrigating if the energy consumption for that season was less than a certain amount. So they grow rice and wheat. So if a farmer for his 2 hectares of land was using less than a certain, you know, whatever that amount which was set by the utility was, then they would get some money. So, however, for that kind of policy to be effective, there are several things that need to be understood. One is that will that amount of money really incentivize the farmer? So the question is that you know, how much money does he earn from his farming? That will that small amount of money make, large amount of money make a difference? Second, can he really even cut down on the water usage because he needs some water usage for his crops? And thirdly, how much energy, that energy payback, how much water saving does it lead to? And is that water saving amount a rational amount, as in can he do it and will it make a difference? Okay. So these are things that, so these kind of questions can only be answered if we understand the connection between the crop being cultivated, how much water it needs, and what is the energy requirement to pump out that much of water. So that's really the reasoning. And then there were other demands for this kind of a tool and analysis. So essentially the way this methodology works, this work was done by several students. So my PhD student Namita mainly, but also others like Pankaj Sharma, Akanksha Do, and they also contributed to this work, and us Cobra projects. So a lot of the work, data collection and development was done as a part of a project that we did for the Department of Agriculture called Project on Climate Resilient Agriculture, Government of Maharashtra. So this was work done from 2017 to 2021 or 22. So essentially, what do we want to know? We want to know how much water does a certain crop need and what is the energy requirement to pump that much water. So we need two things: how much water is being used by farmers for a crop and what is the energy intensity in kilowatt hour per meter cube to pump out that water. Right? Now that kilowatt hour per meter cube is going to depend on what the water source is, and well, so right, so we did this. So essentially, can you just next slide? Yeah, great. Thanks. So we did a lot of field measurements to get this energy intensity data. And what you see in this plot here is kilowatt hour per hectare mm or kilowatt hour per meter cube. I will just slide a factor. And the head. So these green dots show the energy intensity from open wells for surface irrigation. And these blue and brown symbols show the energy intensity for pumping using drip or sprinkler from open wells. So we found there's a difference. So we took an average for the open wells. For the bore wells, we saw that there was a huge change with season because there's a lot of change in well depth in bore wells unlike open wells. So you have these energy intensity parameters developed for these common water sources in Maharashtra. Secondly, to find the amount of water used, we take what is called number of irrigations. Like farmers, so what do farmers do? Farmers irrigate their field maybe once in a week or 10 days or 15 days. Okay, so they irrigate it once the whole field. Then over those 10-15 weeks to 10-15 days, the soil might dry out and they will irrigate it again. So for example, if wheat is cropped from say November to March, there may be 9 irrigations for wheat over the season, 6 to 9 irrigations. And this changes depending on how much water is available that season, what's the soil type, etc. So number of irrigations is something we can very easily get from farmers because they remember. They remember even last year I gave 4 irrigations for gram per cent. So that can be determined from surveys. Second, we find the amount of water applied per irrigation. So that's determined by measuring irrigation depth. So that is if all that water in the field was distributed uniformly, what would its depth be? So we did a bunch of measurements to find irrigation depths for different irrigation methods, border, furrow, sprinkler, drill, etc. So multiplying the number of irrigations and irrigation depth tells us what is the volume of water being used. So now you have the energy intensity, you have the volume of water, and you have some other parameters like which source of water is used, because farmers will use say open wells for crops which are what they term as low value. That is crops that don't require intensive capital, a lot of capital, but their profits also not that high, say, so like gram or pigeon pea. However, for things like grape, orange, which are capital intensive but also high remunerative, farmers will invest a lot in bore wells. So there is a crop water source correlation which is taken into account to find this energy intensity. So that's how you can find. So essentially the output of this methodology is that for a crop, I can find the kilowatt hour per hectare energy used and the mm of water used. Okay. Alright. So how do we test this methodology? So we tested this methodology 2 ways. One is that the utility doesn't have metering data at, the only place it first has metering data is at the substation level. That is, it is measuring the energy that is supplied to an entire feeder, which may be 1 to 6 villages. So I know the energy consumed totally over these 1 to 6 villages, and that data is very high resolution temporal data. So we apply this model for at the feeder level, so that we could test it. So what you see here is, for a particular feeder, this was some 9 villages, that this red line shows the energy consumption data on that feeder starting from June till May, so one entire season. That dashed line shows the output of a methodology. Okay, so you can see that it's a fairly good match, and this was done for some 10 feeders. These colors here show the crops into which the energy is going. So this pink shows wheat, the grey shows cotton. So right, so we know. So essentially from this data we can find the kilowatt hour per hectare. So this was done at some 5 clusters, and this is the outcome of that methodology for every crop. So these are the field crops, those are the horticultural crops. This plot shows the kilowatt hour per hectare. Now, when I started off, we talked about energy payback schemes and how tariffs or reduction of subsidy would affect farmers' water usage or and in turn energy usage, right? So to estimate that, this plot shows the cost of energy as a percentage of profit. So if you look at wheat, for instance, you can see that the cost of energy is in fact more than 100% of the profit. So supposing the government took away tariffs altogether, farmers would likely just stop growing wheat because it's... So this essentially tells you the economic value of the energy subsidy, how it's working out for various crops. So, right, so essentially what this does is it gives policy makers a tool to do a realistic analysis of effect of energy pricing on food security and incomes. And this is the standard methodology that can be applied to any area. So it could be applied at the farmer level, at the transformer level, at the village level, or higher levels also. Alright, so that was this energy. Now, this is the next topic. The same methodology is now being applied as an energy estimation tool. So this is used for distribution infrastructure planning. So what we do is, before I get into that, I just want to show some data because how do we understand problems on the ground. So I talked about quality of supply issues, that this is the common narrative. However, if you look at papers, there are papers from 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Also, this quality of supply issue affects different places differently. So we wanted to get an understanding of what it is in Maharashtra. So as a part of Pokhara, we visited 14 villages to do focus group discussions and interviews, and we found that distribution transformer failure rate and pump failure rate and farmers' issues are huge. So this was something which is very common, and it's something that we've seen in villages. So if you find a village without issues, that's uncommon. Right, so this is some more detailed data. Essentially, one of the major problems, cost-wise as well as the effect on the farmers, is distribution transformer failure. So if a distribution transformer fails, it affects the 25 to 30 farmers who are connected to that transformer. And it takes about 8 days to like a month, sometimes even up to 2 months for that transformer to be repaired. Okay, so in that time, farmers may not be able to irrigate, leading to loss of yield, or they might have to spend on diesel. Richer farmers may spend on diesel or drag a cable from a neighboring BT, a distribution transformer, to get power. You don't need to take pictures. So this table on the left side, in fact, shows the distribution transformer failure rate in Kazakhstan block. You see it's 28%. That means 1/3 of the transformers have failed every year. And this is not even one of the high failure regions as told to us by several MSCDCL officials. The second issue is delay in, so before that, the other second issue is pump failure. So why do pumps fail? Because the voltage at the pump is low, and this happens, you get low voltage at the pump because either the lines are too long for the particular load. So essentially both distribution transformer failure, pump failure and low voltages, all of these happen because the system is loaded with more pumps than it is designed for. So the capacity is low. So, and that also connects to one more thing, which is the delay in getting connections. So farmers, like if you look at this data, this is from one particular subsection. You see this data is from Jan 2021, and these bars show how many farmers were applied for a connection in that year. So you can see a lot of them applied for connections in 2016 and 17, still waiting for a connection in 2021. And that's not a small number, because if you see the total number of consumers who are waiting for connection, that's 23%. That is 23% of the current number of connections. So farmers, if they have a well, they apply for a connection when they have access to a water source. If they have access to a water source, they are not going to wait for that sanctioned connection. They are going to connect their pumps whichever way they can and draw water. So that also leads to overloading in the system. Of course, that's not the only reason. There are other reasons like marginal farmers. So these farmers want to do irrigation only, say in the protective irrigation, like in the Kharif season when there is a dry spell, or sometimes if there is a temporary source, like a stream or something, they may once in a while do a rabi crop and they want one irrigation. So in that case, they don't want to apply for a connection because that means they're going to be saddled with a bill all lifelong. So they don't want that. That's of concern to them. Okay. So essentially we see here that infrastructure capacity is the problem because the way the utility is working is that farmers apply for a connection and then they set it up. So they may sometimes they may need to apply. Essentially, a farmer applies for a connection in a certain area and there's a transformer there. However, that transformer is already loaded. So now the utility has to install a new transformer before we can give a connection. So that takes more time and more money. So instead of going by connection, what we have done here is this energy estimation tool looks at what is the cropping and irrigation requirement of an area and hence what is the distribution transformer capacity required, because the distribution transformer is it's like a bottleneck. It is also the most expensive part of the system. So every connection costs about 1 lakh and 30% or more of that cost is the distribution transformer. So what we've done here is to estimate what is the capacity required in the peak season. Because if you satisfy it at the peak season, then you'll find the rest of the year. So if you look at this, this is the demand data from our model as well as feeder data for a certain feeder in Marathwada, in Nanded. Right? So what you see here is you have 3 lines. One is the blue line is the feeder data, that is the energy consumption from the meter and the substation, and the grey and orange are 2 slight small variations of the model. Now you can see that a peak demand is going to come up in say the first fortnight of November. Now how much is the demand here? What this says is that according to our model you need 163 megawatt hours to be supplied in that peak fortnight. Okay, the data shows 156, which is not so different. But this infrastructure capacity, these are the DTs in these 4 villages on this feeder. The total KVA rating infrastructure transformer capacity of this feeder is about 1400 kVA. So that 1400 kVA can only supply 127 megawatt hours. That means it's an overloading of 130%. So, and this matches, if we look at the distribution transformer failure data in those villages, 7 of them, out of the 20 transformers, 7 of them failed in that year. So what we do is, in our estimation tool, we have applied this concept at the village level. That is, for a particular village, we take the cropping data, we take the surveys required to collect like the typical number of irrigations, we find the percentage of farmers doing drip versus sprinkler, when do the open wells dry out and hence the bore wells are brought on, start to be used. So these are the kind of data that can be collected through surveys. And then the irrigation depth and energy intensity of sources we have already determined. Now that is common across the state of Maharashtra because you have a certain range of open wells which is used all over the state and range of bore wells, right? And irrigation depth also depends on farmer practices, soil types, etc., which we have considered for the state. So now what we've done is we have taken the cropping data of one village. Why a village? Because Department of Agriculture collects data at the village level. That's the smallest level it collects at, the cropping data. So you use the cropping data to find the energy demand for irrigation over the year. And you see that there's a peak requirement of 25 megawatt hours in November. Now the current capacity in this village allows a safe usage of energy of 20, but the requirements much more. Now if all farmers use capacitors, if they all install capacitors on their pumps, it essentially reduces the capacity requirement for a certain energy dispersal. So then your safe zone would increase a little. That is, a little more energy could be supplied to the farmers. Okay. So this tool methodology was implemented in 10 villages of Bhil and Varda district, and this whole process was done through Krishi Sahayaks, the agricultural assistant. So every village has one agricultural assistant, and an agricultural assistant may have, I don't know, 1 to 10 villages under him. So they were trained on this tool, had a workshop, and then they collected the data in the villages. That data was fed into the tools and the results generated for every village. That is, what is the transformer capacity required for the village, and also the input data. So it was all collated together. The input data that went into it, what is the output, and what is the transformer capacity in the village. So this was done in 10 villages, and then these results were presented at the Rabi Hangam Baitak or the winter season meeting. That is, so the winter, November to March, is when there is heavy irrigation. So a meeting, so these Rabi Hangam Baitaks or winter meetings were organized at the start of the season for planning for water budgeting as well as this energy analysis, this energy discussion. Okay. So at this meeting you had the farmers, you had the Krishi Sahayak or the agricultural assistant, and you had a representative from MSCDCL, the wireman or the junior engineer. So these three parties came together. The Krishi Sahayak presented the data to the villagers. The farmers also gave some feedback on, yeah, this cropping pattern is right, or maybe there was a small change. They also told about which transformers failed the previous year, if something failed twice. MSCDCL representative was asked for updates on the maintenance. What was the maintenance done on these transformers last year? What is the planning this year? So essentially, taking stock of the status of infrastructure, the requirement based on cropping and action taken or proposed. So what was the plan from MSCDCL side? The farmers were also demand side initiatives were presented to the farmers like capacitor usage and load management. And it was documented if there were any farmers who were doing these things or had done these things in the past. So essentially this is a documentation was done. So it's aggregate data for higher level policy decisions also, but it also develops an understanding of a collective common understanding between the farmers, Department of Agriculture and MSCDCL, the distribution company. So essentially this information cooperation and collective action is developed among the farmer community and also other stakeholders. And so this is how it was incorporated into the government process. And a notification was sent to all Department of Agri officials in the state to hold these winter meetings and have a discussion about the electricity issues. Okay, and encourage demand side management. Okay, so that's about, that's a tool that we developed based on problems on the ground and incorporated into government processes. So the last is demand modeling, which is a higher level analysis and solution, but it connects back to this bottom. So this is something we just started working on, but I wanted to present it because for one it's very interesting and current, and also it shows you, this is something that will show you how on-ground practices and on-ground data collection is important for even high-level, very high-level decision making. It makes that connection. Okay. So essentially, integrating renewables. Renewables are inevitable. We have to have them. Increasing renewables in the system, and this is going to be a challenge. Integrating renewable energy, even though solar PV is cheap, like today you get these solar energy tenders go at rupees 275 per kilowatt hour, which is very cheap. However, actually integrating it on the grid increases cost in many ways. Why? Because supply and demand has to be matched at all times. That is now, and this is a problem because the renewable energy is infirm, you have the peak solar in the daytime which we have no control over, we have wind blowing whenever it blows, and so we don't have control over when the supply comes. But the demand is whatever people want. So how do you match those two things? And this is turning out to be a problem already because in our country and in our state we have this must-run status for solar and wind. So anyway, how is this turning out to be a problem? So look, so this shows you this data. If you look at this plot, it shows you the data in demand data for a day, starting from 12 at night to 12 at night again, on July 1st. These different lines are for different years. So you can see that there's a slight dip at night, small increase in the morning, but largely quite flat, right? And it's at about maybe 15 gigawatts. Now, this is the current solar injection into the grid. So that's only about 2500 megawatts or 2.5 gigawatts. Okay, so this is a small amount of this total demand. However, the Maharashtra government has planned for already 9 gigawatts of solar agricultural solar energy feeders and a 5 gigawatt solar plant, a separate solar plant. So that's already 14 gigawatts. So 14 gigawatts means that's where it's going to be. So essentially, once you have this coming online, your solar generation is going to be like this. And this is your demand. So why is this a problem? This is a problem because it means that your other energy sources, which are right now largely thermal, coal, right? Coal is going to have to ramp down and ramp up to complement that, so that you have supply equivalent to the demand. Because solar has to run. Essentially, the solar energy has to be used. Now, this is a problem because coal plants cannot be ramped up and down every day. It's very expensive. I mean, they can be, but it's very expensive. So that's going to lead to inefficiencies and increased cost on the grid. Okay. So now, for a better match, essentially what we need to do is we need to match our demand with supply. That is, we want to get people to shift their demand to the middle of the day as much as possible. And this can be done how? Through having time of day tariffs, that is, have low cost power when there is high solar injection or high renewable injection, whatever that may be. So if we look at, this has been done in Germany. If you look at this plot, what does this plot show you? So on the x-axis, essentially you have 10th May to 16th May. And on the y-axis you have the generation and demand data in gigawatts. Okay, so now this black line shows the load. Okay, that's the demand data. And these different colors are different energy sources. The yellow is the solar. So if you see this peak, each peak corresponds to one day, right? 10th May, 11th May, 12th May, etc. So you can see that the load, this black line, broadly follows the solar generation peak. And how have they achieved this? They have achieved this through time of day tariffs by giving much lower costs at when the generation is high, when the solar generation is high. So they have managed to shift their loads, of course. So for us to be able to do that rationally, to decide on the tariffs, and right now, for instance, in our country, we have different tariffs for different categories of consumers. So industry, commercial, residential, we have different tariffs. So if we want to do this rationally, so that we need to understand first of all which consumers will be able to shift their demand, right? And at what tariff will they be able to shift the demand? What is the demand from that particular category of consumer? So this means understanding the demand patterns of consumers. So what we are planning to do, so we've already developed this, essentially this agricultural methodology, this energy for irrigation, this methodology, this water energy crop methodology we've developed is really a demand model, because we are able to predict the agricultural demand based on the cropping pattern. So now this has been done for agriculture, we want to do it for residential and other categories. So this data is data from Pranit's our MTech student who just graduated. It's from his report, and you can see it's for one village feeder in Varga. And why feeder? Again, because the feeder is where you have demand data. That is, homes are metered for energy, but we don't have the variation over the day for homes, right? You just have this kilowatt hour. You don't know how it varies over the day. However, at the feeder level, you have data for 15-minute intervals. So what you see here in December, you can see evening peak and morning peak of about 175 kilowatt. In May, what you see is that the evening and morning have increased about that to over 200, but what's very high is the midday and the night times, possibly due to cooling load. Now you can see some other correlations. This is the same feeder, consumption data of kilowatt hour per consumer, average kilowatt hour per consumer. You can see that is directly correlated to the temperature. As the temperature increases, energy consumption increases. Now, we had only feeder level data, but this data is from a report from another organization, CEW, and they have smart meter data. So smart meters means they are the meter on the consumer's premises, which, I mean, our energy meters are not smart meters. These smart meters record the consumption at every, 15 minutes. So you are able to see the pattern of consumption. So what you see here is that smart meter data analysis. Now this plot shows the consumption over the 24 hours on a summer day, and this plot is for consumers with high energy demand. So you can see that it's very high at night, and also in the midday, but the peak, there's much higher demand at night. And this last is consumers who have very low consumption overall, so you can see it's fairly flat. So this is the kind of understanding we want to develop, so that we can then decide what is the contribution at what time of the day from what type of categories of consumers, what are their loads, will they move it to the middle of the day, and what tariff should it be so that they are encouraged to move. So that's the kind of analysis that needs to be done. And eventually this will also then be used for supply side planning. That is, how much solar can be integrated into the grid without it becoming economically problematic. So it's a supply side as well as demand side, and really it should also, I mean, the transmission system is also a factor in all this, because depending on where the plants are, depending on where the demand is coming from, the transmission system needs to be planned. So, right, so this is about the demand modeling framework. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about the education aspect. So essentially, we are trying to incorporate these lessons and this work into educational curriculum. So Unnat Maharashtra Abhiyan is a program which it's a program to include other educational institutes, that is other engineering colleges and other colleges in Maharashtra in the development program of the state. So we've done, under UMA, we have done workshops with electrical engineering faculty of students and faculty of colleges to analysis of the load engine network of distribution transformer or distribution transformer loading. And we've also developed a textbook with the topic of agricultural feeders. But it essentially takes problems from the ground and teaches the electrical engineering concepts like macro modeling or systems analysis, and also pumping systems, basic pumping systems, fluid mechanics, etc. And it has field-based case studies. So that's a way of essentially bringing engineering to a more applied discipline with regional problems. Right. So yes. So that's it. So I've gone through 3 case studies. And this is the educational aspects. So I'll stop here. And
anyone have any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I had a doubt regarding the requirement of the distribution transformer, the energy consumption. In the chart you had shown that it was 226 kilowatt ampere, and yes. So if you mentioned requires 301, I want to know how did you arrive at upon that particular number for 301?
No, so 226 kVA is the current capacity in the village. So I don't know, it will have like some 363 kVA transformers, 100 kVA transformers. So that adds up to 226. Okay, so if there's 100 kVA and 363, that's 183 plus, so 283 kVA, but something like that. This 301 kVA we get from, so essentially, yeah. So based on the cropping pattern, we find out what is the peak energy required in any fortnight. Okay, so now for this feeder, this second fortnight of November is where there is a peak demand. So this is the amount of energy that needs to be disbursed. So now your transformer, essentially that fortnight is 15 days. So if this energy needs to be disbursed, say 600 divided by 15. 40 megawatt hours is the energy that can be disbursed on this feeder per day. That means that the power rating is going to be 40 divided by 8, assuming 8 hours of supply. So that's how you get the KVA rating.
So this will be only for the considering the peak for each fortnight, or will you consider the average for over multiple years while determining that
No,
particular?
yeah, so that's a good question. That's a very good question. So we've done it for a certain year of cropping pattern and requirement. But yeah, if you want to determine, I mean these things can also change. So you may want to take a typical cropping pattern or the cropping pattern that you would expect in a heavy rainfall year. Because heavy rainfall years is when farmers will do more winter cropping. So if you want to plan for that, you may want to plan. That's how we want to do it. The other thing we want to remember with this is like we train the Krishi science to collect the data. Really, that's an exercise that should be done every year or every other year. Something like that. Essentially because this can feed into various things. So first of all, just an understanding for the government that where is our water, which crops is our water going to, where is the energy going overall, how many farmers are, because we collect data on drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, so how many farmers are using drip, sprinkler. All of this data needs to be updated because it's really important to have this kind of updated data for decision making.
Beautiful and enlightened. And so my question is that borewell, pump failure, and that's very much correlated with the borewell depth. So you are collecting that data, no? How much water is there, how much. So in this modeling, I am a little confused about that. For predicting that in that time of the year that this failure can happen.
No, so failure is different from borewell depth. So essentially, why does pump failure happen? I mean, pump failure can happen for many reasons, but one of the things is just that low voltage, when low voltage is supplied to pumps, they draw very high current. And it heats up the wires and heats up the insulation, and that's why the pump fails. And then it has to be rewound. So that's why pumps fail. Nothing to do with the borewell depth as such. Does that answer your question?
I was thinking that in summertime there is less water, so more pumping are happening. And,
Not necessarily. So pumps are made to, motors are made to operate. They can operate for many hours without failing. That's not a problem. Like they can operate for 8 hours a day and they will not fail if they are operating under the right conditions.
So perhaps has the operating point changed substantially?
So in dry season, when the borewell depth is a lot, is the pump really ill suited for that situation?
So, okay, so what
That-
what Professor is bringing up is the operating point of the pump. So essentially, a pump is made to operate at a certain well depth. Okay. So if you look at this data, essentially these pumps, the farmers in the field, right, because they use their pumps for surface irrigation, that is not sprinkler or drip, so unpressurized, like just put the pipe in the field. Surface irrigation means just put the pipe in the field and the water flows out. Or they do drip or sprinkler irrigation. So drip or sprinkler irrigation is pressurized. That is, the water has to come to that sprinkler outlet or drip outlet with at a high pressure. That means you are adding a head. So if a well is say 15 feet deep, or let's say meters, like 8 meters deep, then that is the head if I'm doing surface irrigation. But if I'm doing drip irrigation, it adds like a 25 to 30 meter head. Okay, so then now suddenly my head is 40 meters, the head requirement. So when farmers buy a pump, they have to buy a pump for a particular head. So they will buy a pump for a 40 meter head so that it operates there at the required flow rate and also at the low head conditions. But what happens is that is extremely inefficient then when it operates at the low head. So what you see here, efficiency. Essentially these pumps, you can see that the efficiency is extremely low. Like this is the head 5 meters to about 15 meters when they are doing surface irrigation. And the efficiency is say 2-3% to like 15%, very low, that's very low. And then when they are doing drip and sprinkler irrigation, your head is varying from say 25 to 40 meters. That time your efficiency is a little higher. I mean it goes up. There's a wide range of course, but you have much higher efficiencies. So essentially for bore wells, like farmers will most likely buy a pump which operates at a well depth of the bore well. So at that point it should operate efficiently. But even if it's operating inefficiently, I don't think it will draw more current than it should.
Hello ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to ask about the energy payback scheme. You mentioned that. And the second point is, how can we integrate the entire project from an economic aspect? Like, will it be cost effective for the farmers also? If the according to the energy for irrigation, how it can be effective to the farmers?
So first of all, so what was the question of the energy capacity?
What is exactly?
So like several experiments have been done. So for instance, now, okay, so we want essentially this one, they wanted farmers to reduce their water extraction. Okay. So let's say on an average they know that farmers use, I don't know, like 1,000 kilowatt hours per acre. Okay. They know that that's a typical usage. Now they may say, look, reduce your energy usage to 800 kilowatt hours per acre and we'll pay you 12,000 rupees per acre. That's what is an energy payback scheme in this case. That's what it was. There are other energy payback schemes. For instance, there was one done in Gujarat where they had a community solar PV system connected to the grid. Okay. So essentially the way that works is that as long as your solar pump, you are either using that energy to pump, or if you are not using your pumps, that energy is being fed back into the grid. Okay. So that's what is called a net metered or grid connected solar pump. So they incentivize those farmers that, okay, so you use your pumps for irrigation when you need to, and when you are not using it, then you are feeding energy back into the grid and you will be paid for per unit of energy. So that's another scheme to encourage them to reduce their water usage so that they're more, when they're not using the pump, they're earning money by putting their energy back into the grid. So these are the payback schemes. Now your other question about how to make this beneficial to farmers, this methodology you're talking about? Yeah, so that, that's a much larger question. So, so essentially the idea that of doing this, like there are many papers out there. For instance, there are papers that say that, okay, if we increase the price of energy by this much, this is how the food cost will increase. And this is how farmers' incomes will be affected. Okay. But those studies are very generic, like they just take some average cost of energy for per unit area or even per kg of fuel. So detailed input about how if they increase the tariff by a certain amount, how will it affect the farmer's income, how will it affect the cost of food. So that's the idea of this. We are not giving any recommendation that this should be done, but this is just input data or a tool to use for that kind of study.
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, just a follow-up of the payback thing that she said. When you incentivize this thing saying that 12,000 rupees is the amount, even if you reduce the consumption by this much. At the same time, you have to check whether the increased use of water gives them more yield, which probably gives them more amount of money than the incentive itself. So is there a way of, is there a correlation study that they actually do while setting up these benchmarks? Or is it something that is looked into after incentivizing?
No, that's an excellent question, but in my opinion, it should be done before the study.
Yes.
That's how they'll be able to do some rational design, so that they have some. You don't want to do something. See, you just do something. First of all, these whole studies and these experiments are expensive. So you do something and then you find out that it's not good. Plus, you won't get that much data. I mean, you want to do a rational design, which is why you should do detailed studies like these.
So it's not happening at that level as of now.
No.
Okay.
As
And I had the other two questions was the drip irrigation and sprinkler irrigation that you said. Very recently, big irrigation is something that came up, which has reduced water consumption. Is that something that is happening on
Big irrigation.
big irrigation?
I don't know it's common.
Okay. And
And
the,
I don't know whether you should be
okay. And the last one is any source of renewable technology. This was a statement that any source of renewable technology could affect the grid economically. So economically is just the as you said for the solar thing, there are it is a dispersed form. It is very difficult to acquire energy. Is that the reason for the economic?
No, I didn't. That's not the thing. It's not because it's dispersed. See, right now, if I look at the infrastructure cost of solar, and I look at its lifetime and all that, we can calculate the cost of energy generated from solar to be about 275 per kilowatt hour. So that's taking into account dispersed and everything, takes into account the area required, everything. So the problem here is that if I increase solar to such a large extent, see these are loads. Okay. That means this is the power demand. Now, if I increase this plant of 14 gigawatts solar, if it is implemented, will lead to a supply of this kind of a shape at this height. That's your demand. This is your solar, only solar supply. Now, first of all, until solar goes up, I need to fill in this demand with some other sources, right?
Yes.
And then when solar goes down, also I need to fill in this demand with some other sources. That has to be something we have control over. So that's like thermal, coal. That's one of the biggest sources in our country.
Yes.
So that means my solar generation needs to be ramped down and ramped up every day. Correct?
Correct.
That's very expensive. That will step up cost for everyone, generation cost.
Hello ma'am. So can we go to the borewell energy density?
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah ma'am. So borewell density chart. So ma'am, it is showing the linear progression in increasing trend. So November to May is typically a Rabi season, and around November and December there is cropping going on, plantation is going on, and in the March to February-March season there is a harvesting season. So then also the energy intensity is increasing. So it is demand or what?
So this is energy intensity. Means the kilowatt hour for every meter cube of water, how much energy do I need? So that only depends on the head. So the energy required, essentially the energy required for pumping out water depends on the head, and the volume of water. So here I'm taking per unit volume, that's what that is. So that's only increasing because the water levels are dropping.
So, my one question is that solar and load demand matching. I'm just curious, India as a one grid, is it bringing some challenges in this? Because I understand that even at a low dispatch level, you are having some national share from some national level plants and NTPC and all. And how to identify that this particular electron is coming from that particular plant and say,
Yeah, so I mean, this is it's really interesting because I find this really exciting. So they have what's called a load. I don't think we can tell which. I mean, I probably need some crazy amount of computation to know where it's coming from. However, they have something called load dispatch center.
yes.
So now, what the load dispatch center does is that they plan for the next day on 15-minute intervals. That is, MSCDCL will say, at this substation, in this 15 minutes, this is the expected demand. Okay, they give a plan for all substations. Secondly, generation plants will say, every 15 minutes, this is what I'm going to supply.
Yes.
That those two things have to be matched by the load dispatch centers. Okay.
But yeah,
Now,
I understood that, but then I am also saying that for a load you are having those discrete points. I can understand that this particular load is in this
yeah,
state.
so here's what happens. I'll just tell you what happens. I don't think that the electron thing, I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably need crazy amounts of computation. But basically what happens is that, so supply and demand has to be matched all the time, almost. If demand increases, then what happens is that 50 Hertz, it drops the frequency. And if generation increases, then that 50 Hertz goes up. That is, if the demand drops and your supply is more than the demand, then that frequency goes up. When that happens, if the frequency starts to drop, the utility, the load dispatch center will see what demand had we scheduled, and whichever demand is more, it will tell the utility to shed that load or that utility, whatever. Secondly, if you look at the generation, like if the frequency is dropping, then whichever generation plants are actually supplying more energy than they scheduled, they get paid more. And the ones that are supplying less than they scheduled, they have to pay, some fine. Yeah. So this is how they manage those things. But I don't think I'm sure they can tell if they sit and do the analysis.
So my secondary question is because you presented this model, this limited model. So what is the error? Because when you are saying modeling that I'm simulating. So actual thing and then
yeah, we have some data. So Namita can tell you that because she has for the various speakers what are the. So in fact, interestingly enough, I can show you something which is interesting. So these are like 4 feeders from 4 districts, and what this, at least to me, looks like. So this has a huge mismatch. Now you can see, right? This is the data, the red line, and that's our model. And one of the reasons for that is that this is a region where they have many storage tanks, they have a canal where they pump water from, and they do a lot of transfers. That is, so the canal, this is an area with like huge grape, is 400 hectares, that's like almost, half the area is under grape. So that needs irrigation all year round. So now the canal has releases, the dam has releases, water releases in the canal every 15 days or something, or once a month after November. So what do farmers do? They extract water from the canal when there's a release and store it in their tanks and in their wells. And then they will pump out from there into their drip irrigation system because they need to irrigate every day a little bit for grape. So that means there are like a bunch of transfers, like first of all from canal to tank, which we have taken into account, but we don't know because every farmer is doing something different. Like they have a drip irrigation system from the well, so they might transfer from tank to well or well to tank, all kinds of things. So that's the reason for the mismatch. But to answer your question, exactly I
And last question, that you had a discussion on this irrigation depth. So I'm also thinking, of course we are talking totally in terms of, discussing in terms of energy, but was there any discussion with the farmers during the actual practice, what was the irrigation depth, and then was there any impact on the quality of the product? Because sometimes it is observed that farmers are giving more water supply to their crops, and then they ultimately see that the crop quality got impacted. So,
That's supposed to ask that question.
Yeah, so there's also a story like
Largely, no, until he gets it. Farmers were very careful about irrigation. Like they have the proper furrows, the land level is quite good, they are there, and they are in the field while irrigating. They don't go away. They move the pipe from furrow to furrow.
No, but I think there's a lot of study which you have done and you have done actual measurement of irrigation there. But they change from soil type to soil type. So this is on the average what happens.
Yeah.
And how much buffering they can achieve is depends on the rotation and so on. But this is usually right.
so there is challenging bringing some standardization in that.
Yes, yes. So the error estimate, I mean, these are as good as it gets.
Okay, that's the standard. So, I mean, the thing is that we are applying that model at a higher level. So it sort of averages out. But you do see, like we've done that at the village level. Now, if we apply that model at a transformer level, right, you'll see more errors than at the village level. Because there are variations, how to come with variation.
So Priya, what would be the way forward? Like, can you give some pointers that where we need to work on or what's the direction of that?
So,
Like one good part that I can see, I said getting associated is that wherever the ponds are there, I think the energy demand is less. The example of Nasik that you mentioned. Right, so increasing number of ponds certainly at the ground level storage capacity will definitely reduce the energy demand. So such, what can be the other pointers?
I mean, so, see, so then first of all the ponds thing, I mean, energy is only one aspect of it, right? Like there are various other aspects that come into whether a pond is suitable or optimal for a particular area or not. So, like each of these things have a bunch of things that can be taken forward. So I don't know exactly how to answer that question. I mean, so the demand modeling clearly there's a way forward for us. This energy estimation tool also, Piyush is doing this project of scaling up. We've done it at figure level, he's going to scale it up to the block level.
What all you suggested are the kind of the scenarios that are ongoing. And it is realized that there is significant energy requirement, water loss is there, extra water is getting pumped out. But in order to address these challenges, what all can we do?
I'll give it.
Yeah, big picture. Where to?
So, for instance, one of the things, I may as well tell you so that you get to know. So, this Professor Milan Soni, he was the PR of the project on climate resilient agriculture, was a co-PI. So, one of the things that they are doing, his group does some work on water, they are looking at water budgeting. That is, how much is the rainfall? So, in Maharashtra, the way things work is we don't have storage. Like in Punjab and Haryana, you have this huge aquifer, which is water stored under the ground. And that's why they say over the years, the water table is dropping. In Maharashtra, you don't have that kind of storage. You have this, what's it called, hard rock aquifers. So whatever, it's like you have monsoon rainfall, the wells fill up, and farmers use it for irrigation, and that's it. And then next year again. So there's no storage as such. Of course, if they do a lot of extraction, then the wells run out faster, and Yeah, there may be some stored water, but largely there's not much storage. So what they are doing is they are looking at water budgeting. That is how much is the water rainfall in the village, and hence how sustainably what is the cropping pattern that can be cultivated so that there is no excessive water usage. So just things like that.
Thanks.
So just a small question. So I think somewhere you also mentioned passingly that you are already looking at agriculture or irrigation energy demand, and now you start looking at domestic. So can you please elaborate on that aspect?
Yeah. So essentially, because we want to do demand modeling, so for instance, so agriculture we've already developed this demand model, which we now want to scale up to profit. So we want to do the demand modeling, power demand variation with correlations to secondary data with season over the day for the other categories, so that we can develop this larger demand model. So that's what we did in Varda. So I mean, this was one feeder to look at how the demand changes in various months, and then this is what Pranit did, and he also correlated it to temperature. So further, what we want to do is we want to see that, okay, like this is what is in Varda, what might be in another village, or that particular feeder in Varda, what type of consumers does it have? Because like the CEW data shows that your high consumption customers have a different pattern from your low consumption, that's really. So but those are the kind of patterns we want to understand and correlate to secondary data, so that can then develop into this larger level.
So in the previous slide, is it the demand or
That's demand.
supply?
That's demand. Because that's essentially the energy.
It's coming from the feeder, right?
Yeah. So supply at the feeder, there's no demand is equal to supply.
Because demand can be also suppressed demand depending on
So
the
that,
supply.
yeah. So you're right. So that we are not taking. You're right. This is what is being supplied. Correct.
It's from like a top-down approach, not
Yeah. Because that's the only data we have. That's the only meter data we have, demand. Otherwise, at the household level, we just have kilowatt hour. We don't have. So
you can have the load shedding data at the feeder level may also be there.
yeah, if we do get the load shedding data at the feeder level, then we'll be able to see what is the surplus. Yeah.
But they are even more reticent to share the load shedding data.
They don't have it. I mean, they may have it.
Rather than doing block level or village level, if it's possible to do it in a catchment level, won't you think it will be helpful? Because it's all related to water now. So
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So it all depends on what data sets. Like cropping data is available at a village boundary level. So that's why we do village level.
Using GIS overlay.
I don't think that technology is that advanced yet. I mean, so many students are working on that. No, so yeah, but you're not going to know what crops are grown like in the various boundaries, right? You have data collected at the village level, but if your watershed doesn't match the village boundaries, I mean, of course there can always be estimates. So that's a good idea. Some study that would.
Okay, can we ask working question? Later, we have to face a quiz on this. This is your chance to clarify any doubts. The first is, that's what Priya has already told you. I hope you have paid attention and taken notes. The recording will be available in a week's time. These might be over by then. So,
Take the quiz quickly before the recording.
If they look at the recording, then that's great.
okay, so if there are no further questions, let us give a big round of applause. To give this seminar, and may I request Professor Dilip Soni, former head of Sitara, who has been, I mean, this is a great opportunity that he attended Sitara seminar today. So, to give this, he has a small.
Thank you. So. Thanks for the opportunity. Really enjoyed this. That's also.
So, yeah, I think we can formally close. If you have any follow-up questions, I think Priya will be available. And those who have missed it, those who came after 5:20, those who have missed the snack for today, we have retained 3 pieces, so if you are interested, please collect it on your way out. Thank you. If you have liked it, you can have a second.